Hello, everyone, and welcome to Researcher's Desk. Thank you for being here with me today. I'm actually a little bit nervous about talking with you, although you're all my good friends, and I shouldn't be, but I still am, and I'm human. That's just the way it is. I'm going to give you a visual presentation of a book that came out, which I've written and came out um, on the 8th of January. And the cover of the book, as you can see, is a piece of artwork done by my daughter, Emmy. So this book is in many ways a collection of metaphors. And the reason I'm going to use metaphors is metaphors can help us to relate to a truth we find so abstract that it does not even feel real. And I'm referring to the climate crisis, which, if we actually think about it, it's really, really hard to grasp. So I'm going to share with you a few metaphors from the book. They'll be shared visually here in the book, though of course they're in writing. A young man is standing on a shore looking out across the sea. Beside him is his wife, and two of his children are standing beside him, and his youngest child is playing in the sand in front of them. You cannot see them in this picture because I've deliberately clipped them out. They're staring out across the sea on what is truly a beautiful morning. There are rocks in the foreground, you can see them, and far away you can see the sea, and then there is a wave on the horizon. What you also cannot see is that there's a small boy who's ran out to one of those pools of water, and that boy's picking up fish and putting them into a plastic bag and carrying them home for making supper. You see, that boy's able to collect fish from the pools of water because everything you see in this picture is wrong. You should not be able to see those rocks. The reason you can see the rocks is that the sea is far too far away. The sea has receded from the shore. The wave on the horizon is the tsunami. This image was taken on Boxing Day, 2004. It was taken by an anonymous photographer in Khao Lak in Thailand. 3 minutes later, the wave hits. And you can wonder why a man stands there with his children looking out at this wave, the tsunami. He does not, the answer, of course, is incredibly simple. He does not know it's a tsunami. You see, the curvature of the earth means that the horizon is only 4.5 kilometers away if you're standing by the shore. A tsunami grows as it moves towards the land, which means you have no impression of scale. You have no idea how big it is or how close it is. Yet the signs are there. There's the wave, of course, the fact that the water has receded from the shore. But would you tell that apart from the tide if you didn't come from this area? And there was the tremor 2.5 hours earlier. It just felt like a truck passing by. But it was the largest earthquake that's happened in 40 years, and it was the cause of the tsunami. The signs were there, but they were impossible to read. And the signs are there. They're all around us. The heat waves becoming stronger every year, the ice melting, the seas rising, the storms, all of those signs are there. And yet we stand there on that beach. We stand there with our children in front of us, watching as the climate crisis engulfs us all. We stand still with our loved ones beside us, and we watch as the climate crisis engulfs us all. This book is about time. It's a perspective on time that, as a geologist, I want to share. In the words from the book, the place you are now, wherever it is, has been perilously hot and freezing cold. It's been a safe haven for living things, and it's been hostile and barren. It is part of a story that is as old as the earth, and its story will continue in a future that is as long again. We're here for a moment in that story. There's a time before us, there's a time after us. Both times are vast, beyond our wildest dreams. If you look at the moon on a cold, starry night, it is of course beautiful, but you're not seeing it. What you're actually seeing is what the moon looked like a second ago. You see, the moon is so far away from us that sunlight reflected off its barren surface takes a whole second to reach us, despite how fast sunlight travels. And if you look at the sun reflected in the sea, you're not seeing the sun. What you're actually seeing is what the sun looked like 8 minutes ago. Because the sun is so far away, it takes 8 minutes for sunlight to travel across space to us here on planet Earth. And if you look now at our second nearest star, our nearest one is the sun. Our second nearest star is called Proxima Centauri. You can see it with the naked eye. It's part of a collection of stars. But you're not seeing it at all. You're seeing what it looked like 4 years ago. 4 years is a long time. 4 years is measurable. 4 years takes us back to the beginning of 2022. It was just before we were going to find out about the war in Ukraine. It was fought long before we were going to understand what was happening in Gaza. It's a very measurable amount of time. Yet if you were in a spaceship beside Proxima Centauri looking back at the Earth, you would see it back then. You would see it in January 2022. And if we look even further afield, and now we need a telescope, you can see Andromeda, our next nearest galaxy. I choose Andromeda because it's beautiful, but I also choose it because what you're seeing is what Andromeda looked like 2.6 million years ago, which is when the Ice Age began. And if you were in a spaceship at Andromeda looking back at the Earth, that is what you would see. You would see the Earth plunging into the Ice Age. And with the help of gravitational lensing and one of the most powerful telescopes on Earth, you can see this seemingly tiny star, which is actually many times larger than the sun. And what you're looking at is Earandel, but you're not seeing Earandel. You're seeing what Earandel looked like 12.9 billion years ago, because it takes 12.9 billion years for light to travel from Earandel to us here on the Earth. And you're left with a wonderful question: how? Because it's a big star. They don't live very long. They just live for a few million years. It isn't there anymore, but you can still see it. Now, from the outer reaches of the universe, we will turn around and race forward through time and space. And we'll race forward for 8 billion years. And when we'll stop, it will be 4.6 billion years ago. And this is when Jupiter created a perfect niche for the Earth to form. And the Earth formed where it was neither too far from nor too close to the sun. So it was a safe haven for life. And if we now represent the next 4.6 billion years until now, with just 24 hours, what we find that happens is that in the first hour, a set of chemical reactions between the land, the sea, and the air was set in motion. And that happened in a manner that created a stable climate. So much so that by early morning on that day, life had emerged in the seas. And life thrived throughout that day. But when evening came, the chemical reactions that had stabilized the climate for 3 billion years ran wild, and the result was snowball Earth, Earth entirely covered by snow and ice. And we do not know if life survived snowball Earth, but we do know that life returned. And when it returned, it was wonderful. It was complex life, perhaps the only planet in the universe where it happened. Snowball Earth was followed by what geologists call the explosion of life. And then some species took themselves out of the sea where they first evolved, and with them came plants. And then, with only 2 hours remaining of our day, the first time the earth became green. And it was green for a while, and there came 4 mass extinctions. And with just 20 minutes remaining came the 5th one, and that was when a meteorite hit the planet from outer space. And now, with just 15 minutes remaining, the Himalaya were born, rising between the places that would become Kathmandu and Ulaanbaatar. And with just 10 minutes remaining, glaciers formed on Antarctica and the Earth started to cool down. And with 1 minute remaining, the Arctic Ocean froze over. And that is when the Ice Age began, which is exactly what you would see if you were in a spaceship at Andromeda looking back on the earth. And in all of that time story, I did not tell you anything about people because people materialized 6 seconds before midnight on that geological day was the emergence of humans. A curious species that sees the world in a very different way. A species that sees nature as a resource, nature as something to be used. And as we move forward through time with just 5 milliseconds before midnight, humans brought about the agricultural revolution, where we started a war with the chemistry of the soil, where we would change it to make it fertile so it would grow what we wanted, where we wanted. And that allowed our population to expand. And as our population expanded, we needed more and more material to keep ourselves warm. We cut down trees, we dug up peat, and then we found coal, the remains of those plants that had been living on the earth for the last 2 hours of our day, which corresponds to 359 million years. And so began the Industrial Revolution, because that coal was the most powerful energy source we could imagine. And then came oil and gas, and we were able to power major industry. And of course, that had a byproduct, and that byproduct was carbon dioxide. And with just a millisecond remaining before midnight, this was when the climate crisis began. I share this time perspective in our time because it matters. And the reason it matters is that over millions of years, living things can adapt to a degree of warming. But over the 50 years that I have lived, they cannot. This time perspective is vital for us to understand. This was where I grew up. I spent my first 6 months at the Loch Ness Investigation Bureau. The picture you're looking at is my father. He was a cameraman. And he was in charge of searching for Nessie. Maybe this is where I got my scientific curiosity. I have absolutely no idea. The place you're looking at is called Achnahannet. It means field of the church. And you're looking out over Loch Ness. I had a very, very privileged childhood growing up in one of the most beautiful places on earth, and alongside the beautiful shores of what is the world's most beautiful lake. Vetern's the second most beautiful. I'm going to fast forward 20 years. I had a wonderful growing up. This was my passion. I spent much of my time skiing. Skiing was what I loved. Telemark skier. It gave me so much joy. I grew up and learned to ski in the Scottish Cairngorms. These are wonderful mountain range. And we would go out and we would ski all sorts of gullies in the springtime. The springtime is always the nicest skiing because it has a whole, we would have up to 50 feet of snow in some of the gullies. And it was magical. And we would find these remote gullies and go with our telemark skis and have our blast skiing down them. And we would always gather together afterwards in a place called Highland Guides, where there were a bunch of ski bums who basically financed their skiing habit by guiding people, which is what hence the name, onto the mountains. The proprietor was a guy, a kind of sullen guy who grew up in the valley, which is what the locals call Spey Valley, which is where the whiskey comes from. And he was very gloomy, and we used to call him Eeyore, and which was really rather unkind, I guess. But you see, the thing with Eeyore is Eeyore would tell us about how it was when he was a child, and although we loved our skiing in the spring, he would tell us it was like that in the summer when he grew up, and there were glaciers in the Cairngorms. You see, Eeyore was the first person who told me about climate change, and we just laughed. We had snow. We had all we wanted. We didn't need any more snow. It was plenty for us. We never thought a second's thought. But Eeyore had already understood the IPCC reports, which were being published for the first time, roughly at that time. This is my wife. This is where I met her. Before at the point we decided to get married. She's up in the Northern Highlands, and we're walking in a wonderful place. Um, and this was a time where marrying someone who lived in another country, it didn't matter. I grew up in the era of low fare airline travel with Ryanair and EasyJet. It was so easy to get back and forth to Sweden. I could get back to Sweden back and forth in a weekend. It was just bliss. I was a fossil fuel addict. I loved the stuff. It was absolutely brilliant. I never thought of what it would mean living in another country and suddenly how far away it becomes without relying on flying. I'm a geologist, and this was the expedition that changed my life as a researcher. Um, you'll hardly recognize me because I had a lot more hair back there then. That was me. And this is another person I'm going to talk to you later on. This is a guy called Nico. He's one of my colleagues. We were on this ship together and we were studying the ocean floor. We were trying to know how the ocean and the continent were joined together, which, believe it or not, we still haven't worked out. But it was a great expedition, and it made my future career, and I'm very thankful for it. I want to take you to Portree. Portree is the main city or village on the Isle of Skye. Now, Skye is an abysmal place if you want to go somewhere for good weather, but it's a very, very beautiful place with the coolins, which are made of a very, very dark rock called gabbro, which gives it a very stunning appearance. And this is the first place I saw what became my favorite rock band playing. My favorite rock band is called Runrig. They're a Gaelic band, and Runrig is a word used to describe a particular type of sharing of the land that was done previously in the Scottish Highlands, where it was set up in strips, and people each would have their own part. So everyone had a bit of the good land and the bad land, and they would share in a kind of really nice way. Um, Runrig were playing in Portree, and they sung a beautiful song, which is called Dance Called America. But the Dance Called America was actually about a dance where it was about the Highland clearances. It was about how people were removed for the land, and that was a part of the agricultural revolution in Scotland. But at that concert, I didn't ever thought about all those things. We just danced. We had a wonderful time. We were being young together. And one of the things I did not think about was the concentration of carbon dioxide in the air outside of the marquee where I was listening to this band was 349 parts per million. It was actually just a few months before we would cross the planetary boundary for climate change. But at that point in my life, I did not know that our planet had boundaries. Let me take you forward 30 years. And I'm going to take you to a place on Islay. Islay is one of the islands off the west coast of Scotland. And I'll take you to a place called Snowball Earth Valley, which I visited regularly and I still do. And this was Snowball Earth Valley, and I visited in 2018. It's a beautiful grassy valley, and it's not really called Snowball Earth Valley. I call it that because I take students there to look at the side of the valley where you can see this boundary between the white rocks below and the beige rocks above. That boundary is Snowball Earth. That boundary is 80 million years. It is the biggest climate change event that has ever happened in the history of the Earth that we're aware about. I get my students to put their finger on it and touch 80 degrees of climate change. I was at that, I was in that valley at one point teaching my students about climate change, and my phone plinged. It's high up, so we have good reception there. And it plinged because tickets had just been released to my favorite rock band, Runrig's last ever concert, which was going to be held in Stirling. So I stopped teaching, rushed away, and I managed to get myself tickets, 4 tickets for myself, my wife, and my 2 kids. Um, and then I went back to the Rock and carried on teaching about climate change. This was the concert. It was called The Last Dance. It was in Stirling, just beneath the castle. It was spectacular. There were 17,000 of us there. All the people from the Glen had come down. The people from Islay were over. The Shinty team was down. They actually rescheduled their match to be there. It was an amazing experience. But what I didn't think about when I was at that concert, I'd flown over on the Friday and was flying back on the Sunday. Rental car from Edinburgh up to Stirling. What I didn't think about is the carbon dioxide I added to the atmosphere with that one trip weighed more than the rental car that we used to get us from Edinburgh to Stirling. This was my last dance, but I did not know it was my last dance. And I don't think any of us do. I did not know it was my last dance until the music finally stopped playing. Back at Snowball Earth Valley, one young person, after I've shown them this major climate change event, asked me a question. Is it happening again? Of course, the answer to that is no, we can't have another Snowball Earth. There's vegetation on Earth. That vegetation will make it very difficult for the Earth to freeze over. But at the same point, I know that that's not the question that the young person is asking me. The question that young person is asking me is it happening again? Is it happening now? Is this that what does that boundary really tell us? And finally, I understood. I understood what it meant. That pencil thin line on the rock face could be our time. I found tears in my eyes. They were for the stromatolites of the past and for the children of the future. Let me take you forward in time 1 year. I made rail travel my thing. I guess it was because I was too weak-willed to give up eating meat, which I really should do. I eat less of it, but I really should do. But it became my thing. It became my symbol. I made the decision not to fly because I'm in the privileged position of being able to. Many people can't. Rail travel is expensive. Rail travel takes more time. You can't do it if you've got a young family, but I can. I'm a rich professor. So this was my symbolic act. On one of those trips, one of my students on Isla as well, doing his thesis out there, had a friend, and that friend was called Toya. And she told me about this. Toya was setting up this thing called Researcher's Desk. And would we come over and would we participate in this desk? And I did, and this changed my life. And I know the Researcher's Desk means a huge amount to this audience. Was an amazing experience because we were suddenly doing something. We were doing something about it. We were communicating knowledge in a different way. The IPCC reports are marvelous and have made huge inroads, but now we were communicating to the public in a place where the public was reached. 2 years later, I had the privilege and terror of speaking at Climate Live. This was the act before I was asked to speak. You see Greta and Andreas dancing and showing that young people are still young people. It was an incredible event. It was held in the Kungsträdgården Garden. It was in the autumn of 2021. It was shortly before COP26. It was a window of peace in the pandemic. And after the dance was over, it was my turn. I'd rehearsed what I was going to say. And so I knew, and I was going to be asked questions. I knew what they were. I was all prepared. I was holding the microphone. And my hand was shaking. I was absolutely terrified. And I look out across the room, in front of me, and what I see, I'm facing hundreds of children. Many were tearful. And I'm looking to them, and I see hope and I see trust. You see, to them, I'm a scientist, and my task is simple. It was to tell them the truth. I didn't want to, but I did. I had no choice. I told them that we see the signs, the heat waves, the floods, the wildfires, the melting of the ice. I told them that the wave was coming closer. But maybe I should have told them about these houses, these small red houses perched on granite skerries. These small red houses are symbolic of Stockholm. They're built right by the shore because the land rises here, so they're safe. But they are no longer safe because soon the sea will rise faster than the land. Their fate has been decided. Those small red houses, they will disappear. I want to bring you now back to Nico, who was with me on that ship. Um, Nico is exactly the same as me. He's a geologist. He does more structural geology. I do more petrology. The nuances don't matter. Um, but Nico saw it before me. This is also Nico. Nico chained himself to Crown Bridge in Berlin and was fined for doing so. He started engaging in civil disobedience. Why did he do that? Why did Nico do this? You see, while I was standing on the shore watching as the wave crested the horizon, Nico had already understood what it all meant. In our time, I also introduced you to Sophia. Sophia was actually one of my students. She read geology and came with us on our Scotland excursion. I remember looking at her in the back of the room when I was explaining the excursion. She was absolutely furious. She thought I was going to force her to fly. We actually offered a train alternative. Um, while Greta was across the Atlantic giving her "How dare you" speech, Sophia was one of the people coordinating would become the largest climate manifestation of all time. Um, Sophia was both an ordinary girl and extraordinary. Um, she was one of the many young people who created the Fridays for Future movement. And what makes me really happy about Sophia is not that, it's this. Sophia is being set free. This is Sophia, like all young people should be, enjoying life in Korea, where it's just her passion out walking, which makes me very happy. You see, as adults, we sometimes speak of these youths as our hope, and it is so wrong of us. The young should not be our hope. We should be our own hope and the hope of our children. And on the topic of hope, I will take you to COP26. I've only been to one COP and I only won't go to another one. I don't belong there. I'm not a negotiator. We have better people in researchers' desks to send there. But the COP was an important symbol for me because what I saw there was magical. Um, it was a place where everybody was a part. There were, of course, the negotiators who fought bitterly for getting phrases like phasing out fossil fuel subsidies and reducing coal into the agreement. But it was not just them. There were the activists outside. There was Extinction Rebellion running a ceilidh that the negotiators walked through. There were the police looking after people, and there was the priest Annika who walked there from Vettern. The COP at that time was a moment where everyone was working together. Um, And the successes, even if they're limited, but the successes of that COP belong to absolutely every one of them, from activist to negotiator. Every single person contributed, and of course, all the people who fought so hard to get there and never did. You see, our time is the moment when the wave crests the horizon. In this moment, we still have choices. We can stand still and watch as the wave engulfs us all. We can turn our backs on the children who are playing in the sand and run to protect ourselves, or we can call them away from the shore and run together. And I close our time with the oak tree on Visingsö, this island in the southern part of Vettern, an oak tree that was planted among many others in 1831 so that there would be oak wood for building ships in the future. By order of the king, these oak trees were planted. They were planted with a beech around them, so the beech would block out the light, so the oak trees would be forced to be straight and tall, because that's what we need for shipbuilding. But of course, when it came to harvest time in 1975, the oak trees were not used, cut down, and they were not used for building ships because ships are built of metal. And in these oak trees, there are two messages of hope. One message is to imagine that you were there and you planted the seed that would become that tree. Could you have imagined that ships in the future would be built of something completely different, built of metal? Probably not, because you would expect the expected, which is what we do today. We expect that the economic system will be the same forever, or that we're somehow locked in. We expect that the legal system will be the same forever. The political system will be the same forever, ever. But history doesn't teach us that. History teaches us it's not the expected that happens, it's the unexpected. And again, imagine you plant that seed that becomes that tree. You don't plant it for yourself. You won't be there when it's harvest time. And that when we unite and we solve the climate crisis, that's what we're doing. We're not doing it for ourselves. No one listening to me today is going to be around when the temperature curve goes the right way downward, but each and every one of us will be around to watch the emissions curves going down because we're going to bend that curve together. So when we face the climate crisis and it all becomes too much, and all that we can feel is sorrow for a species that seems so close to the end of its time. We can find guidance in those beautiful oak trees and expect the unexpected, because history teaches us that it is the unexpected that actually happens. Our time is written for the children in Parliament Square and for V. some Finns.